Hey everybody, I'm Chris Americos and welcome to another video. Before we jump into this video, I have to give you a warning. In this video, I'm going to be using the term native speaker a lot. And I'm going to explain why I use this term and why other people use this term. And I just want you to know that you'll need to watch all the way to the end of the video to really understand what this video is about. So let's jump right in. First of all, why do people use this term native speaker? For the last 100+ years, people have been using the term native speaker to try to sell things. And it's not only about English, although today most people think that this is related to English language learning. It's an issue that has been attached to other languages in the past as well. And it's all about how people learn languages and where they can get the right example of a language. So people have always thought that if they go to a person who speaks this language naturally, if they go to a person who speaks this language fluently, if they go to a person who has always spoke this language, then they will learn the right version of the language. In the time of Napoleon, people in Russia actually wanted to learn French, and they spoke French. The aristocracy in Russia at that time spoke French as well as Russian. And if you didn't know French, then you weren't part of the upper class. And they wanted their children to learn French. So they hired native speakers. And this is a really interesting period of time to look at because typically it was hard to find someone from France who wanted to go and live and teach French in Russia. And what would happen a lot of times is you would find immigrants from other countries near France, many examples of people moving from Northern Africa to France who learned to speak French fluently. They would be hired and they would go to Russia to work in these royal families and these aristocratic families. And what the end result was, at least this is how the story from Russia goes, is that those children would learn French from these people. Then they would go to France and try to make connections there, political, business connections. They would try to get an education there. And when they would get there, no one would understand them because they were speaking a different type of French, or they were speaking a different dialect, or they had learned a different accent. And this was the bane of their existence. The people who were trying to find these tutors and teachers for their children, they emphasized so much that the person must be from France because they wanted to avoid making this mistake. And then the end result was overstated. It was stated that no one understood them. Of course, people understood them, but they spoke with an accent. And here is where the marketing opportunity came from, right? It didn't just start there. I mean, this has always existed in language learning, but this is a past example that we can apply to our modern day world because we see this repeating over and over again. Around the world, students believe that they need to study with a native speaker. Even students who have very low levels of language ability, they might say that they want to study with a native speaker first because they don't want to learn bad habits or they don't want to learn the wrong accent. And businesses and companies and schools have latched on to this idea because it helps them sell their product. In many places around the world, an hour lesson with a native speaker is 2 or 3 times more expensive than an hour lesson with a non-native speaker. Now, how is that fair? And it's not about fair. That's really the main point here that we need to underline and we need to remember, that it's not about being fair. It's not about what's right and what's wrong. It's about money. It's about marketing. The term native speaker is a marketing term, and that's why people use it to sell their product, to sell a more expensive product, and to convince people that this product is better than others. So let's not forget that when we get into a discussion of native and non-native, and when we compare quality and where people are from, and all of these things that are connected to this discussion that has become popular in our recent times. Now, I wish I could stop there. I wish I could say that's the marketing trend, and people don't realize it's a marketing trend, but it's there. I think today many people understand that that's about marketing, and that most people don't actually believe that after they are educated in the ways of language teaching, right? So pedagogical universities will hopefully tell you about this, that native speakers aren't necessarily better at teaching a language, and you can't necessarily learn a language better from a native speaker. It should be clear to everyone, right? So why do people still not believe it? Well, really, the main people who don't believe this are beginning teachers, typically native speakers, or non-native speakers. So beginning teachers who don't really have enough experience in this sphere, in this area, to know why that's not true. Or students who have just heard this marketing so much that they've believed it. And that's just the beginning, because today, in our recent times, we have a new marketing trend. It's the anti-native speakerism marketing trend. You'll see lots of people talking about how this is a problem, how we need to change this belief that native speakers are somehow better than non-native speakers at teaching the language, or that they're more effective, or that you can learn better or faster from them. There's going to be lots of people attacking this idea, and they're attacking it for marketing also. It's really an interesting study. It's really an interesting phenomenon to look at, because think about it. In this video, the title is something with the words native speaker. And when I take all of the text, all of the audio transcript from what I'm saying right now, and I include it, it's going to say native speaker, native speaker, native speaker all over. It's just going to say the words native speaker a million times. And when people write articles about anti-native speakerism, and when they write about how it's not right that native speakers are considered better, what are they doing? They're writing the phrase, the words native speaker over and over and over again. Well, this is also a great opportunity for you to market this, because if you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people going to the internet and searching for native speakers, then your website, your video is going to pop up at the top of the list. Because clearly, if you've mentioned it so many times, you're speaking about this topic, and people who are searching for it probably need to find you. So when you find someone who is telling you that this isn't right, and they seem to be on a hunt for the truth, never believe that in the first place. When someone seems to be on a hunt for the truth and to be so benevolently telling you why everyone else is wrong, think about it for a minute. By talking about this topic, they're drawing more attention to themselves. And it's not only about native speakerism. This is just a trend that's happening in our society, and it's happening globally right now, where you need to rebel against the traditional ways of doing things. It's a marketing trend. So why do businesses use these marketing trends? They use them because they work. If people already believe this idea, it's harder to change what people believe than to use what people believe in order for you to get what you want. And that's why you see people having these discussions. That's why you see websites writing articles about is it really better to study with a native speaker? Or when is it better to study with a native speaker? Or should we stop studying with native speakers? Many people have different opinions on what this actually means for language learning in the future. But one thing is for sure, when you see people talking about this, there's about a 99% chance that this is marketing. So let's step away from the phrase native speaker for a second, because there's another phrase that people use a lot. They use the phrase without an accent. In many countries, someone speaks without an accent, and that means that they are a native speaker. And if you speak with an accent, this means that you're not a native speaker. And of course, in those places, when people say with an accent, they mean with mistakes. And when they say without an accent, they mean without mistakes. We all know the reality of this, right? That native speakers make a lot of mistakes. And a highly trained non-native speaker might actually make less mistakes than a native speaker. However, of course, that it doesn't matter because it's just marketing. And most people out there who are discussing this topic don't actually care about what is right or what is wrong or which is better or worse, right? And most of us know already by just thinking about the simple facts. We already understand what's true and what's not. We already understand that every person in the world speaks with some kind of accent, that every language has different variations and varieties. We also understand that English is our global language, the lingua franca, that English is a standard for international business, for online communication. And as such, English has taken on a new role, that English does not only belong to the traditionally English-speaking countries, and those traditionally English-speaking countries are becoming less English-speaking. More and more immigrants have moved there and influence how this language is developing, and the English language is taking in foreign words all the time. So you have different standards of English in different places. So sometimes people will say native speaker, sometimes people will say without an accent, and both of these things are used to market products that are more expensive or to argue why they should be more expensive, to say that they are more valuable, more effective, and that they get better results. Now, in case you don't know the truth about this, or in case you feel that not everyone does understand the difference, the truth is that with low-level language learners, it is typically more effective for them to learn with someone who speaks the same first language as they do. So a bilingual teacher who speaks both English and Russian would typically be more effective teaching low-level Russian speakers who are learning English. Because if they just sit in a room with a person who speaks English at them, they're not going to pick up very much, especially if we're talking about adults. And when we have someone who speaks the same language as them, we can explain some of the steps, we can explain some of the pieces in their first language, and then we can give them English language equivalents. Now, this doesn't always have to be like a translation method, right? A grammar translation method or anything like that. It can be very effective when done properly. And it's about getting the person to actually say the words, to produce the sounds, and to start using the language. However, just putting them in a room with a native speaker isn't going to do that typically. So with lower level students of languages, native speakers are at a disadvantage because they can't communicate information that might speed up this process. Now, at higher levels, it's more of a debate, because you could have a great teacher who teaches this material very well, but if you're going to do a course on accent or pronunciation, then this kind of course or study should be focused on a specific area geographically, typically, right? So a specific type of accent. And clearly, if you want to learn the Geordie accent, you should probably review speakers of that accent. So your teacher actually doesn't have to have that accent, but wouldn't it be nice to have a live example in front of you? And that's how most people think about it. Now, you could also have a great non-native teacher teach Geordie accent and use lots of examples of people who speak with this accent, and maybe they themselves have even spent time there. So there's lots of options and variations and ways that we might say that one kind of teacher is better or worse. But really, what is a native speaker? It doesn't really exist. This term exists for the purposes of marketing. So let's break it down. There are some people who we call native speakers, and native speaker typically means that a person has spoken this language for their whole life, or since they were born, from the time that they were a child. And we can really see that there's a lot of different people who might fit into this category, and that's why it's difficult for businesses and for teachers and for students especially to know if the person is really a native speaker or not. For example, there are some people who are first and only speakers. A first and only native speaker of English, if we want to call them that, first and only speaker, this means that English is their first language and English is their only language. Now, what do you think? If this person has never learned another language before, then how much experience do they have personally with language learning? If you find a polyglot, a person who knows many languages, don't you think that they might have developed better strategies for learning languages in general? I mean, it sounds logical, right? It's not always like that. We can never say that it's exactly like this 100% of the time, but it makes sense, doesn't it? And then let's look at first and many language speakers. People who speak English as their first language, and then they also speak many other languages. These people might also be native speakers, but they have experience with other languages. And this is where it gets really interesting, because typically a first and only speaker of a language will consider their use of the language to be more pure, to be purer than other speakers, especially first and many speakers. Because when a person learns a new language, this new language might affect how they think about their first language also. So many people who are first and only speakers criticize first and many speakers and say that they are less of a native speaker than they are. And isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting that you could be a first and only speaker? You could only speak one language. You could make lots of mistakes in that language, but then when someone points out that it's a mistake, you say, well, those are just the standard rules and those don't apply to real life. That's just what they say in a book. But I have lived my whole life in this country. I have spoken this language my entire life. So of course, what I say has to be right. It's an interesting perspective. It's an interesting philosophy that you can't be wrong because it's the only language you speak. And just think about it. If you needed to create a business and you only spoke one language and your business was connected to teaching that language to other people, well, it's a good position for you to take to defend against other people who might say that you don't teach correctly or properly. And this is another point. What does it mean to teach correctly or properly, or speak correctly or properly. This means that we have some standards of language use, and we have to follow these standards. Now, of course, grammar in itself gives us standards that we should follow. So there are rules to the language. However, many of these rules can change depending on where we go. And it's definitely not the most simplified version of the language, right? People can still understand us when we make some mistakes, but other mistakes will cause people not to understand us. So what really makes a native speaker? Does it mean that you don't speak other languages? I don't think so. Does it mean that you have to speak many other languages? I don't think so. I think that the term native speaker is just a marketing term. It's just used to sell things. So it really shouldn't make us feel so uncomfortable, because there's lots of things that are used to sell things, right? Lots of words and terms. I mean, if we think about food, companies use the term organic, natural. But those things typically are not really organic or natural, just like with native speakers. So here's what you should remember. You shouldn't be fooled by people using the term native speaker or the word accent. You know, if someone says without an accent or with an accent, what's happening here is someone is trying to prove why they are better than others. They're trying to show that their product is better than others. Another way that people do this very often is with certificates, diplomas, and other pieces of paper. So just imagine a person shows you their diploma, and what are they trying to say when they do that? If they come to a job interview, or if they have a call with a potential student and they say, I have a bachelor's degree in this, I have a master's degree in this, I have a PhD in this, I have a certificate to teach this. What are they really doing? They're telling you, believe these pieces of paper because I haven't proven anything, right? And that's what they're doing when they sell you on native speakers. They're selling you this idea that they don't need to prove that they will get results, but that because they have this label, native speaker, that you can just believe it. It's crazy, isn't it? Because we all know that a person who gets a piece of paper, a certificate, a diploma, a degree, we know that they're not the same, that some people study hard and get a lot of results, and then they really know what they're doing. Some people study a lot and don't get results, and they don't put it into practice. And some people don't study at all, and they still get the piece of paper. TEFL certificates are exactly like this, and all of you out there know that. So let's think about it, like really think about it. Just being a native speaker doesn't actually make someone better or worse. Just having a piece of paper doesn't make it better or worse. It's just a term, it's just a way that you are communicating value to someone when you're trying to market yourself. It's all about marketing, sales, and advertising. It's business. So this is what is really important. I'm making this video because I feel like a lot of people on the internet today who are in the EFL, ESL, TEFL, TESOL, TESOL, this community, they're getting fooled by people making videos like this one, writing articles on their website, posts on social media about anti-native speakerism. Don't be fooled. This is a marketing trend. It's becoming more popular now because of the unpredictable times that we're in. Right now, there's a trend worldwide, globally, to take a stand against injustice. And this trend always happens. In history, you can see it happening, becoming more prevalent and less prevalent. It always happens in periods of history where there's a destabilization of international order. Right now, the United States has been a leader internationally, and its influence and power is waning. It's becoming less. It's decreasing. And this means that there are going to be lots of challengers. It means that all of the traditions that have stuck with this paradigm up to this point are going to fade away. And that's why people are challenging them right now, because there's available space in the market. So you'll see people talking about racial injustice more. You'll see people talking about inequality of all types more. And this concept of native speakerism and non-native speakerism is just one of those topics. It's one of those points, and people are going to use it to their advantage to gain a position that's more advantageous to them and to their business or their company or their organization. So if any of you thought that that's not what's happening, I just hope that in this video I'm able to communicate at least a little bit of this idea to make you think about it. In fact, this video itself is going to be a marketing tool where I'm using this topic to attract attention. Don't be fooled. I'm one of these people. So most people who are focusing on this topic, they don't actually want to take action. They just want attention. Because let's face it, if they wanted something to change, then they would go out and they would hire non-native teachers and they would promote those lessons and those products, but they don't. They just make a video or a blog post and they tell you, this is bad, this is wrong, we need to change this. But if they really wanted change, they would just do it. How many of them are actually hiring non-natives? Non-natives, right? I mean, we've already discussed how this term doesn't actually make sense. How many of them hire non-natives? Maybe zero, maybe one of the people who you read who are talking about this. Most of them aren't in a position to hire anyone. They haven't even built up some position of advantage or strength that they're able to use to incite change. And they haven't even rallied people enough around this topic. They don't focus on this topic completely. It's just a marketing trend. It's just the title of a blog post. It's just the title of a video. So don't be fooled by that. But how can this change? If we really want it to change, then how can we make it change? I really only see two ways. The first way is going back to this traditional concept of native speaker and non-native speaker, where because it's all about marketing, one way that this can change is students can become more aware of this. And that's probably one of the goals of most of the people who are writing posts and making videos and releasing information about this, that are attacking this idea. Of course, they're taking advantage of this current market trend, and they're taking advantage of the current times where we're rebelling against everything traditional. But what's going to change things is really when students vote with their dollars. When students choose to give their dollars to non-native teachers and to organizations that hire non-native teachers over native teachers, that's when this will change. When companies are impacted financially, they will see that this marketing trend has ended. So that's one way that this might change. But the other way that this might change, and this is more realistic, I think, is that the whole field of language learning will more or less be made obsolete by technology. And this is a real option. This is a real situation that's approaching us right now. Because as we speak, companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon are working on products that can understand language and translate language so well that you won't ever need to learn the language. you'll be able to use some kind of tool or instrument or gadget to just translate what you want to say. We already have Google Translate that you can just hold up to a sign on the street and it will translate it for you. Or you can speak into it and it will translate for you. And these programs and tools, they're only going to get better. So it's less likely that we're going to end this marketing trend of native speakerism. And it's more likely that this will just become obsolete because there will be less people trying to completely learn the language. Now, of course, when this technology first comes out, it's not going to completely make everything obsolete. People will still learn languages. And even when these gadgets and machines become widespread, people will still feel like they want to learn the language so that they can speak without the machine, right? They'll want to feel more comfortable and natural, and they'll want to pass this on to future generations. However, we can see that traditions die, and future generations will probably think that learning languages has become a less important task, a less important thing that they need to master, because now they have a machine that does it for them. So that's all I have to say about this topic for today. If you found it interesting, go ahead and write something under this video. If you thought that this was a waste of your time, I'm sure that you'll let me know by writing a comment or complaining about it. Right, that's the beauty of our world today. But I hope that at least it caused you to think about why people are discussing this topic. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you see a video like this one, you'll understand why it was really made for marketing purposes. Again, my name's Chris Americos, and thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.